Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, when the world seems to be falling apart, where do you find refuge? When the pain is so great that it seems impossible to find a way through, where do you look for peace? Did you know that even in the darkest hours there is a safe place, a divine power that will never leave you? Today I want to talk about something that can change your life. Trust in God. Maybe you're wondering, does He really listen to me? Am I worthy of His care? The answer to these questions can completely change the way you view your life. Stay with me to the end, because by the end of this video, you'll discover that the refuge you so desperately seek has always been within your reach, and that trusting Him is the way to true peace. Have you ever felt completely lost, as if you were adrift, not knowing where to turn or where to find solace? Life, with its ups and downs, sometimes feels like a battlefield where storms come without warning and contrary winds blow us away from our center. There are times when we look around and wonder, where is God when everything seems so difficult? Or maybe you've felt like you're looking for something or someone to hold you up, but you don't know exactly what. The refuge we seek is often not far away or in perfect circumstances, but right next to us, ready to welcome us if we have the courage to trust. In times of pain and uncertainty, the feeling of being alone is very strong. You may feel that the weight of life is on your back and that no one understands your struggles. But know that in all that you experience, there is a divine presence that will not abandon you, no matter how difficult the journey may seem. Even when your eyes can't see, God is there, close by, ready to be your refuge. He is not far away, He is not absent. He is within you, all around you, waiting for you to know Him and to trust Him. I remember an occasion when many people were in distress and didn't know how to move forward. People were surrounded by pain, doubt, and fear. Many asked themselves, where is God when the difficulties seem so great? And with compassion I said, God is in the stillness of your heart. He is in every breath you take. He is the refuge you seek even when you can't see Him. What happened there was something simple but transformative. As people understood that God was not in a distant place, but always within reach of their trust, many began to experience a deep peace that came from the certainty that they were supported by something greater than the difficulties they faced. It's important to realize that we don't have to carry everything alone through difficulties. The idea that we have to deal with everything on our own can lead us away from a simple and liberating truth. God is the refuge where we find strength, rest, and comfort. And that strength comes not from our own efforts, but from our ability to lay down our burdens, to trust that He will sustain our steps even when we don't know the way. Imagine you're in a dark place, trying to see ahead. Your eyes are tired. You don't know what else to do, and the fear of not finding a way out seems to consume you. But deep down there is a soft light, the one that has always been there, illuminating your steps even when you can't see it. That is God. He is the light that never goes out, even in the darkest moments. You just have to stop, trust, and let that light guide you. When the storms come, it's easy to forget that God is there. The rush to solve problems and the pressure of circumstances can cause us to lose focus. But the truth is that He has always been there, waiting for you to look within and find His care. As a refuge, He offers not only comfort, but also wisdom to face what life brings. He teaches us not to fear, not to despair, because He never leaves us. That sounds hard to believe, doesn't it? How can we trust something we can't see with our physical eyes? The answer is in the heart. When you choose to trust, you begin to notice small manifestations of divine care in your daily life. A kind word at the right time, extra strength when you need it most, unexpected peace when you feel exhausted. All of this is God revealing Himself in your life like a safe haven, even if you don't realize it right away. Have you ever tried surrendering anything to Him in prayer? Surrendering doesn't mean giving up or giving in to fear, but rather recognizing that there is a greater power that sustains you, that is always available. By trusting God, you make room for Him to work in your life in ways you couldn't imagine. And this is not limited to big moments of crisis. Every small challenge is an opportunity to trust more, to allow Him to be your refuge in all circumstances. Now I ask you, what do you carry that you can leave in God's hands? Is there something in your heart that when you hand it over, Even if the problems aren't solved right away, it will bring you instant peace. Trust, hand it over, and see how the burden becomes lighter. For He is your refuge, always present, always ready to receive you with love and compassion. As you begin to trust more, you realize that you are not alone. When difficulties come, you already know where to hide, where to find refuge. And as that trust grows, you begin to feel the peace that only God can give. A peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances, but on the certainty that whatever happens, He is with you. Sometimes the simple act of stopping and breathing, trusting in God, is all we need to feel His presence. This refuge requires no effort, no perfection, just a sincere surrender. And in doing so, you begin to realize that the peace you've been seeking is actually already within you, always available, waiting to be recognized. How many times have you found yourself in a situation where there seemed to be no way out? The weight of the problem was so great that there seemed to be no solutions. The world around you screamed impossible, and perhaps you began to believe it. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt become so intense that we often feel paralyzed. But even when the impossible seems to take over, God whispers into our hearts, "Trust." In our daily lives, we face challenges that often make us question our strength and ability, and it is in those moments when the burden becomes unbearable that our faith is called into action. I remember when many people would come to me, their eyes filled with despair, and say, "I can't do it anymore, it's too much for me." I would reply, "What is impossible for you is possible for God." Often the difficulty is not in God, but in our willingness to trust Him even when we don't see a clear path. God doesn't promise a life without challenges. On the contrary, He warns us of the tribulations to come. But what He does offer is a promise, "I am with you," and that is enough to transform any situation. When I said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest," I was inviting everyone to realize that the relief they so desperately seek does not come from human strength, but from trusting in a divine power that can transform reality. The world tells us that we are limited, that our abilities are finite, but the truth is that when we put our trust in God, we are no longer alone. He doesn't expect you to solve everything on your own. On the contrary, He wants you to trust Him and allow His strength to be manifested where you feel weak. The story of a man who faced a great challenge, like a giant, is a clear example of this. He didn't use his own strength to defeat the enemy, but trust in God's power made him victorious. Trusting in God doesn't mean that life will always be easy or that difficulties will disappear. But it does mean that even in the midst of struggle, He will be at your side, guiding your steps and offering a peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. And when you allow yourself to trust, something wonderful happens. You find strength not in yourself, but in the one who strengthens you. Trust is the key that opens the door to the freedom that God offers. And this freedom goes beyond external circumstances. It frees your mind and your heart. But trusting in God goes against everything the world teaches us. The world teaches us to seek immediate solutions, to control everything, to have quick answers and certainties. But God teaches us that true trust doesn't need explanations. It is born in the heart, in the certainty that He is in control, even when we don't understand the why of situations. I have seen this clearly in many of the most difficult moments in people's lives. When they turned their worries over to God, something changed in them. They no longer tried to control everything, but learned to trust in what He could do. This kind of trust doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, patience, and perseverance. But with each step of faith, you feel the peace of knowing that you're not carrying the burden. God carries it with you. He doesn't say that the weight will go away, but that He will be by your side, holding your hand and guiding you along the way. And as you trust Him, you begin to realize that even in the midst of chaos, there is an inexplicable peace, a peace that transcends human understanding. When you look at the difficulties of life, you may even ask yourself, "Do I have the strength to overcome it?" And the divine answer is clear. No, but you have God on your side. He is the strength you need. He is the solution that you cannot find on your own. When you put your trust in Him, the impossible becomes possible. You no longer try to solve everything on your own. You allow Him to solve it through you. And when you put your trust in God, it doesn't mean that the problems go away. They may still exist, but the way you face them will change. The anxiety that used to dominate your thoughts will give way to calm. The fear of failure will disappear in the face of the certainty that no matter what happens, God is in control. This brings incredible freedom, true peace. You no longer need to fear the future, because by trusting God, you know that He has already prepared the way for you, even if you can't see it clearly. That's the power of trusting in God. It's not a guarantee of a life without problems, but it is a guarantee that you can face anything with Him. And when the world cries impossible, you can hear the quiet voice of the Father saying, "Trust in me. I am your refuge, your strength, and with me nothing is impossible." And by trusting in Him, you begin to realize that there is more than just hope. There is a real strength that arises in your heart, a peace that comes from within, a peace that passes all understanding. This is the peace that He offers, a peace that no one can take away from you. And it is this peace that helps us to see beyond the difficulties, beyond the chaos, beyond the impossible. As you trust, what seemed impossible begins to be transformed into something possible. But to fully understand this, you must take the next step. There's something else you need to know about how God can be your refuge, especially in times of chaos. And that step will help you find the true peace you so desperately seek. Modern life is filled with noise. Sounds all the time, cell phones ringing, alerts that go on, traffic, work, incessant thoughts in our heads. All this often makes us so overwhelmed that we lose focus. Anxiety grows and there seems to be no room to breathe. But there is something profoundly transformative when we choose to seek silence. True refuge is not just about getting away from the outside world, but actually quieting our soul so that we can hear the voice of God who is always at our side. I always used to say, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." The promise was clear, but the way to receive that relief often requires something many of us are unwilling to do. Stop. Stop fighting the winds. Stop trying to control everything around us and simply rest in God's presence. It is in silence that we find the true strength to move forward. I know that for many of you, the idea of stopping may seem impossible. The world demands more and more of us, more productivity, more answers, more action. But silence is not the enemy of action. It is its greatest ally. When I was surrounded by crowds, it was often in the quietest moment that I found clarity and direction. Silence is not the absence of anything, but the full presence of God. Make no mistake, silence is not the absence of movement. In fact, it is a space where God can act without interference. It is in silence that you begin to perceive the peace He offers. True refuge is not in running away from difficulties or trying to ignore them, but in turning inward and allowing God's Spirit to calm your soul. In the midst of chaos, noise, and fear, God calls us to a place of stillness. And when you respond to that call, something begins to change. You no longer feel overwhelmed by circumstances. The weight of life becomes lighter, and peace begins to fill every part of your being. Perhaps you're thinking, but how can I find this stillness when I'm surrounded by so many distractions? The answer lies in a simple act of surrender. Silence is not something that is created outside of you. It begins in your heart. It begins when you decide, even in the midst of the hustle and bustle, to quiet your thoughts and trust. Put your worries in God's hands, without the need to understand everything, but simply to rest in His presence. Often the biggest obstacle to finding this inner peace is our mind, which never stops thinking, planning, and worrying. But God's silence is not the absence of thought. It is the presence of deep stillness, where you allow God to guide your heart and bring direction and calm. In silence, you begin to realize the truth that God is already in control. He is not absent. He is very close to you, waiting for you to turn to Him, even in the midst of chaos. I have seen in many situations how the simplicity of a moment of silent prayer can bring more peace than hours of trying to solve problems with your own strength. And this peace is not temporary. It is permanent because it does not depend on external conditions. It depends on your trust in God and His ability to be a refuge for you in any circumstance. When you feel overwhelmed, it may be best not to try to solve everything right away, but to take a break. Take a breath. Let God's stillness enter your heart and replace fear, anxiety, and frustration with His peace. I've always said that God's peace surpasses all understanding, and that peace is only accessible when we choose to stop and listen. Make no mistake, silence is not the absence of action, but the preparation for deeper action. By silencing the noise within you, you begin to act with more clarity, more confidence, and more peace. And from this place of peace, your decisions become firmer, your reactions softer, and your steps more sure. When you allow yourself to rest in God, He begins to guide your steps in ways you often don't even realize. Silence, then, is the place where God's true power begins to manifest in your life. Have you ever tried to stop and just listen to what God has to say to you? Even when the world around you is in chaos, it is possible to find a peace in silence that transcends all difficulties. When you stop, you realize that true refuge is available in every moment, and that this peace is not just a possibility, but a divine promise. The power of silence is not in running away from reality, but in facing reality with a new perspective, the perspective of trust in God. When the noise of the world is silenced, we find the answers we're looking for. And when you discover this inner peace, you realize that you no longer need to fear the chaos outside. For the refuge you so desperately seek is not far away. It is within you, in the presence of God. And as you do this, as you allow yourself to be still and trust, you begin to perceive an inner power that doesn't depend on external circumstances. That power is God Himself, supporting and guiding your every step. And from there, something wonderful happens. Peace is not based on what is around you, but on what you have found within yourself. There are times when life seems unbearable, when challenges pile up and the weight of responsibility seems to crush the soul. At such times, it's easy to ask yourself, does God really see me? Does He care about what I'm going through? It's a natural question to ask, especially when we feel like we're alone, battling adversity on our own. But the answer, my friend, is clear and true. You are never alone. God has a promise for you, and that promise is more than words. It is an eternal, unchanging commitment that transcends all circumstances. He has promised to be with us at all times, in every struggle, in every doubt, and in every step we take. In my journey, I've seen so many people question God's presence in their lives, especially when they face moments of pain or loneliness. But in all those moments, the truth is that He has never left them. God's love is constant and unwavering, and He walks with each of us, even in the moments when we feel His absence the most. When life pushes us to our limits, when difficulties become intense and everything seems to fall apart, it is at these times that God's promise becomes most real. He is not just watching from afar, but is present in every pain, every tear, every breath we take. I once said, "I will be with you always until the end of the world." It wasn't a vague or distant promise, but a guarantee that we would never be alone. Whatever trouble you go through, He is there with you, supporting you with His infinite love. The problem is often not that God abandons us, but that we fail to perceive His presence because of our own human limitations. In times of storm, it's common for our vision of reality to become blurred. Fear and uncertainty blind us, making us believe that we are alone, that no one is watching or caring. But the truth is, even if you don't feel it, God is right there with you, holding your hand and guiding your steps. Imagine for a moment a child who is lost in a big city. He may look around and feel afraid, desperate, thinking that he is alone. But the truth is that the Father, though invisible to the child, is always there, just waiting for the right moment to appear and guide the child back home. In the same way, God is always with you. Even when you can't see Him, when the difficulties seem unbearable, He is watching over you, guiding your every step. Have you ever felt that no matter how hard you try, you can't bear the weight of life? That's when trusting in God becomes crucial. Trusting in Him doesn't mean that the difficulties will go away, but rather that you will find the strength to carry on in the midst of them. God doesn't promise to take away the difficulties, but He does promise to be with you and to give you the strength you need to face them. He is the refuge where you find rest, not from your struggles, but in the midst of them. And when you feel completely weak, unable to go on, that's when God's care is most evident. Because He cares for you in every circumstance, whether it is the small victories of everyday life or the most difficult moments. There is no situation that He turns away from, no pain that He ignores. He cares for you deeply, more than you can imagine. This trust in God's care is liberating. When you understand that He is by your side, that He will never leave you, something changes within you. Fear begins to lose its power, anxiety dissolves, and you begin to see situations in a new light. You realize that you don't have to carry everything alone. God is your support, He is your sustenance, and the truth is, as you trust Him, you begin to experience a peace that doesn't depend on what's going on around you, but on the assurance that He is always with you. God's care is not limited to moments of crisis. He is present in every aspect of your life, in every situation, no matter how simple it may seem. From the details of your day to the big decisions, He is there guiding your steps, protecting you, offering His divine wisdom. Sometimes the biggest mistake we make is to think that we only need God in the most difficult situations. But He is with us always in everything. How do you feel now that you know you are not alone? That God in His infinite love is at your side in every moment, even the most difficult? This truth, when accepted with faith, brings an indescribable peace. You begin to live life with a new perspective, no longer as someone struggling alone, but as someone supported by divine power. And as you trust in that constant care, you realize that God's peace transcends circumstances. It is a state of mind that comes from knowing that no matter what happens, He is with you. And this peace that passes all understanding is what strengthens us, gives us courage, and allows us to live with hope even when the headwinds threaten to knock us down. God never promises a life without difficulties, but He does promise that with Him we won't face them alone. He is the safe refuge, the constant care that never leaves us, the love that never fails. He is the peace we need even in the midst of chaos. What do you feel when the storms of life knock on your door? Anxiety? Fear? Uncertainty? We've all experienced those moments when peace seems like a distant memory, almost unattainable. But even in those moments, there is a transforming truth that God offers. He is the source of true peace, and by trusting Him you begin to discover a peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, but comes from His unconditional love. The peace that the world offers is often fleeting. It depends on what is happening around us. When everything is going well, when we are achieving our goals, when our relationships are in harmony. But we know that this peace is fragile. It can easily be shattered by a wrong word, an unexpected problem, or a painful loss. But the peace God offers is different. It is not affected by external storms. It is deep, unchanging, and comes directly from His presence in our lives. I remember a woman on my walk who was desperate for peace. She had lost her husband, her children were far away, and her health was failing. She didn't know how to go on, so I said to her, "My peace I give to you, not as the world gives. Do not let your heart be troubled. Do not let it be afraid." These words, simple and powerful, were a promise of a kind of peace that no one could take away from her. This peace doesn't come from things we can see or touch, but from a deep trust in God's goodness and care. It is important to understand that the inner peace that God offers does not mean the absence of problems. Often difficulties continue to challenge us, but by trusting in God, we find a refuge where we can rest. When you put your trust in Him, worries begin to lose their power. Fear and anxiety don't disappear immediately, but as you surrender your worries to God, peace begins to fill your heart in a way that only He can provide. How do you find this peace? The first step is to allow yourself to rest. You don't have to fight everything all the time. Often what takes away our peace is the belief that we have to solve everything on our own. But when we trust in God, we understand that He is our refuge. He guides us, strengthens us, and gives us the wisdom to make decisions with peace of mind. This rest is not an act of inactivity, but of trust. When you rest in God, you say, "I know I don't have to carry this burden alone. God takes care of me." The second step is to hear His voice. God is not distant. He speaks to you in different ways, in scripture, in moments of prayer, in little reflections throughout the day. When you stop to listen, when you allow yourself to be present and at peace, His voice becomes clear in your heart. We often look for quick solutions to our problems, but true peace comes when we stop, trust, and listen to what God is trying to teach us. And He often teaches us that true peace comes from accepting His plan, even when we can't see everything clearly. God's peace also has to do with forgiveness. Forgiving others and ourselves is an essential step in experiencing inner peace. Forgiveness is not something we do out of obligation or to please God, but it is a gift we give to ourselves. When we forgive, we release the weight of resentment and anger, and allow God's peace to occupy the space previously occupied by pain. I have always taught that blessed are the peacemakers, because those who make peace with others and with themselves are the ones who truly experience God's peace. God's peace is not something we can achieve on our own. It comes when we surrender our anxieties, our fears, and our insecurities to Him, who, in doing so, we realize that even in the midst of chaos, there is a peace that comes from within, something that the world cannot give. And this peace is constant, unshakable, because it comes from God Himself, who is eternal. Have you ever tried to trust God completely in the most difficult situations? When you do, you find that He begins to surround you with a love so deep that nothing can shake you. Circumstances may still be challenging, but the peace that comes from God sustains you, strengthens you, and guides you like a sure beacon in the midst of the storm. And when you surrender completely to that trust, you begin to realize that inner peace doesn't depend on a perfect future, but on the certainty that God is with you in the now, in every moment. When you surrender to God's peace, something transformative happens. Your perspective changes. Instead of seeing life as a field of constant struggle, you begin to see each challenge as an opportunity to trust more. Peace is not something you find on the outside, but something that awakens within you when you allow God to dwell in your heart. When you do, you begin to see the world differently, and peace becomes a constant in your life. Finally, it's important to remember that inner peace is not a goal to be achieved, but a daily experience. As you begin to trust God more, peace begins to manifest itself in every aspect of your life. It doesn't depend on perfection, but on surrender. By trusting God, you begin to realize that the peace you so desperately sought was already within your grasp, waiting to be experienced. Now that you have understood the true meaning of the inner peace that God offers, know that it is the foundation for facing any storm. When you trust in Him, that peace transcends circumstances and sustains you wherever you are. God is your refuge, your fortress, and the peace He offers is beyond anything the world can offer. The time has come for you to live the truth that has always been before your eyes. God is your refuge. In the midst of all adversity, He has never forsaken you. When the world says it's impossible, He calls you to trust, to rest in His peace that passes all understanding. No matter the size of the storm or the difficulties you face, His presence is constant, unwavering, and it is this trust that gives you the strength to move forward. Today, by choosing to trust in Him, you will find not only relief, but a deep peace that doesn't depend on what is happening around you. God cares for you, He sustains you. There is no more fear, no more anxiety. You are in His hands, and with Him all things are possible. May your faith be renewed. May your soul experience the peace that only He can give, and may every step of your journey be guided by divine light. May God's love and peace be with you, now and forever. Amen.